So today, the one tool we're going to be talking about is facing your fears. What does facing your fears have to do with getting sober and staying sober? Well, a lot actually. Um, so I'm going to say the main fears or the main reasons that I started drinking. Like the first one was to have a better time talking to girls, and so then the second one was for bodybuilding, and just my back and everything would hurt sometimes. But then it just spiraled over into everything else that I did.
Yeah.
And that's when it got bad, obviously. Then I started, sometimes using it before I started to work out. And then it started, at first it was kind of like beneficial in a weird way.
Mm-hmm.
At least short term, like, okay, I could talk to girls easier. I could not deal with so much pain. But then long term, it became bad. And then also I had to start using it just to be comfortable talking to people. But then obviously once there's too many drinks, then it makes it awkward.
Yeah, I completely understand that because that's very similar for me. I would use it to deal with like my frustrations, my anxieties, to deal with like different situations that I was uncomfortable with or like didn't like, and just like told myself I had to deal with it. And in some way that was a tiny bit true, but it wasn't as true as I had convinced myself. Like if I had started, instead of using the alcohol, I started saying like, I'm not okay with this, like even just a little bit, I maybe wouldn't have used the alcohol as much, but I was afraid to do that. So alcohol just masked it. It kind of like, it took away the short term, it made it short term not as painful. But at the same time, then it gave me like this little pebble that was like rolling down the hill, getting towards a boulder, of the fact that I was so pent up with frustration, anxiety, anger at that point. Like by the time you got a boulder, you're angry. So in a lot of ways, I would say like when people ask, was alcohol a great tool to fix the problem, quote unquote? Definitely not. Short term, sure. Like I said, it got me through certain situations that I was frustrated with, angry with, whatever. But long term, then I wasn't dealing with those frustrations, angers, and whatever. And it got me sometimes taken advantage of, and sometimes just made me not want to deal with anything. Like just made me want to give up because why was everything so against me? And it wasn't that. It was I had made that happen in a lot of ways.
And then it makes you way like more likely to want to drink again.
Absolutely.
So it's a downward spiral. And
yeah. So I had to start like standing up for myself even. Like that was one of my fears, was standing up for myself. So it was so important to start like doing that the littlest bit at a time. But yeah. So and then like for you, didn't it provide like a Band-Aid in a way?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we talked about this before of, the analogy of just having a little cut and you put the Band-Aid on, but before it heals, you drinking is like taking the Band-Aid off. And so you just keep making that wound actually worse as time goes on. And at some point you have to be like, okay, there's actually a problem here.
Right.
And for everybody, it's different. For me, it was getting, multiple DUIs and dealing with the legal stuff for that, where I finally realized, oh, okay, I got like 3 DUIs. Maybe I have a problem. Some people, it's 1 DUI, and others, it's worse. It just depends on the person and how stubborn they are and how deep in the addiction they are.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, and you're talking about your rock bottom. And my rock bottom was, there was a couple, because truthfully, you can have multiple rock bottoms. For a few years, I would consider that I had a few rock bottoms that other people said I had rock bottom. And so they asked me to go to rehab, or they asked me to go to a therapist to get help. And it did work for like a little bit, but it wasn't my actual rock bottom, and I didn't believe it was my rock bottom. So it wasn't as effective. When I finally got to my rock bottom, it wasn't my first DUI. It was more my second DUI. That was the first time that I considered it a rock bottom. And with that one, like, I was willing to do whatever it took, because when they actually told me the reading of that second DUI, yeah, I shouldn't have been able to do anything, let alone drive the car.
What was that?
We don't need to say the actual number.
Why?
Josh.
Okay, just trying to.
That's a legal thing. You don't say that.
I was just trying to make it like entertaining.
No, I know,
like
but
a lot.
we can't say that stuff.
I thought you could.
No, not on the internet.
Okay.
That could expose us to like problems.
Okay. Sorry. Just trying to make it like.
No, I know, but you have to be cautious of certain things.
Okay.
But anyway,
Sorry.
it's okay. So my second DUI I definitely deserved, no doubt about it. The number was very high. So that's when I finally actually believed I had hit a rock bottom. So I went to Florida for 6 months, and it really did help a lot. But when I came back home, because I always had intention to come back home, I never was trying to move away. But the problem was most of the contacts and everything, the support I had developed was now down there. So when I came back home, I did hit a little bit of a rough patch. And then I kind of went back and forth for a little bit. I would be sober for a couple months, fall off for a few days, sober again for a few months, fall off a few days. But like the real rock bottom for me was when my mom got sick. She had cancer. She passed almost 4 years ago now. And when we found out in April, and she passed in June, that we had about 10 months with her, that I was determined to make sure that my mom would see me sober. So I went to rehab right around that time, and then finding out that she was passing while I was there, had to come home for that. But after that, I knew that had to be my bottom. Obviously I slipped up a few times again for a few days, but like that had to be it. Like I had to get this under control. And thanks like to your help a lot, and, my family and friends and everything, and these tools that we've developed, like I was able to get to that point, and now I'm 2 years sober, which nobody ever thought I'd be able to say. Nobody. So.
No, yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
And yeah, like the tools that we made, they work for us, but not everybody. Mm-hmm. And hopefully some people out there will have similar experiences, like I did do that in the past and that helped me out. Mm-hmm. But so now we're going to talk about so how do you face your fears, especially like once the fears got so big and out of control? Mm-hmm. It's just like the monster in the room, and it used to be a little baby monster, but now it's taking up the whole room almost.
Yeah. It went from a kitten to an elephant.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, as Desmond Toot says, mm-hmm. There's only one way to eat an elephant, and that's one bite at a time.
Yeah. So, like we said, so with that, you just have to know that you have to take a little bit of a time with it. And actually, one of Josh's favorite clinical psychologists is Jordan Peterson, so I hear about him all the time. Yep. But one of his quotes is that what you do with people that are afraid and to some degree depressed, but certainly anxious, is you lay out what they are anxious about in detail, what you are afraid of, what might happen, and then you decompose them into small problems, hypothetically manageable problems, and then you have the person expose themselves to the thing that they are afraid of. And what happens isn't that they get less afraid. What happens instead is that they get braver, and that is not the same thing. And that is so true. Like if you take a big problem and you break it down into so many little pieces, if you just tackle one piece a day, the problem isn't so painful. Took us a while to learn that, but we're starting to do that.
We're still learning it.
Yeah, we're still learning
It's
it.
hard because, you know, you want to feel accomplished and, I did this big it depends on the person, but people want to do this big thing and show it to the world. Look at me. At least that's how I am.
Yeah.
And you can get there, but it's a lot easier if you do little parts every day instead of trying to do it all so quickly,
Yeah. Like even regarding the podcast for me, I started doing lives on my Facebook for my other job just to get myself comfortable in front of the camera again, in front of you guys again, because I was so nervous to talk about this stuff. It's a serious topic and all, but we have so much passion for it because we're, on the other side, and we really want to make sure that other people can get there too. So
yeah, there's two different ways that you can deal with the stressor. And the first way is you can actually just pursue that stress in a voluntary way. And that way you get a lot more positive emotion and less negative when you actually think of doing that in the future. But if you're actually doing it but because someone is forcing you, or you're kind of 50-50 about it, if you do it that way involuntarily, you get this more like prey victim kind of mentality.
Well, it's funny you bring that up, like, because I'm thinking of two examples, like one with myself and one with like little kids. Like with myself, like it's a perfect example. Like the first couple times I went to different like facilities to get help because people were telling me I had a problem, I didn't really have a positive experience. It was like pulling teeth, like I just had to be there. But then when I realized like I had a problem, like I did actually have a positive experience and I met positive influences and things like that. But like the one example that like makes me giggle that I'm really thinking of is a little, like I was a dancer for 15 years. So all I can picture is the voluntary versus involuntary with like the little kids. So there was always, the couple little girls in the class who were like, this is the best thing ever. And they'd run out and they were so excited to show you their dance. And then there was usually like one or two that like, the teachers would like drag them onto the stage because, their parents paid for it and everything. So the teacher's like, I gotta get the kid out there. But the kid is having a meltdown because they're having stage fright. They loved it in class, in front of the mirror with their friends. They were safe, but out on that stage is scary. So like it kind of reminds me of both of those, like for me as a person, but like just thinking about it like little kids, how differently they'd react to going on the stage each year, which was amusing.
No, and it honestly reminds me, the stage fright thing is pretty much what happens to animals when they're the prey animal.
Yeah.
They'll literally like freeze sometimes and they won't even move, and then the predator just kills them right away.
Exactly.
And yeah, we experience the same thing when we're very scared. We just freeze up. We're still, we're animals in a sense. So yeah, no, it's very good.
Yeah.
Yeah. So even during this podcast, like I had a lot of my own fears. One being this podcast, as I'm not the most social guy. And this is it's a lot more work than you would think goes into a podcast.
Yeah.
And then there's also the doubt, will this podcast do well? Is this just a waste of my time? Da 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 da. And then another fear of mine is schooling, which I'm going back to become a psychologist. And it's a lot harder than I thought it would be, especially doing it later in life and also doing it as online, because not talking to people about like different ideas in psychology is just in person. It's a lot harder to talk about those problems online.
Yeah. But but the goal is just to even help one person, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So, we'll call this a success if anybody gets any help.
This is true.
But so I bet at this point, though, that everyone's wondering more about like a step-by-step of how to face your fears, because we're talking about it and we're sounding casual, making it sound easy, but truthfully, it's not easy for anybody to face their fears. Like, it's terrifying. So it's not just like our problem or your problem. Everybody has them. So, yeah.
Yeah, so
But I bet at this point you're wondering how, the step-by-step, how will I face my fears? And we're going to tell you more about that right now.
yeah, so if you start voluntarily taking on the fear one small step at a time, you'll eventually get there without even having to use alcohol as that short-term crutch. Because like we talked about before, short-term, it seems like the best idea ever. Long-term, obviously it's not.
Yeah.
So in fact, something that you thought that you were afraid of, now you might be able to use that as actually a strength. So maybe right now you're not the best speaker out there, but someday maybe you'll do a speech in front of a big audience of like 500 people or so.
Yeah, you never know. You got to start little, though, otherwise, because no one can just jump out on a stage in front of 5,000 people and be confident.
Yeah, that's one of the problems with our society, though, with social media, because we see people, the end result, so it looks like it was instant for them, but this thing took many years.
Yeah.
Of much years.
Yeah, they had to do all the little steps, but you don't necessarily see all the little steps on Facebook, or you miss them, because they could have happened like 2 years ago and you weren't paying attention, or you weren't even friends yet.
Yeah. Or if you see the little steps, you might think, it's not worth it for me.
Right. But like the truth of the matter is, like, you do have to do the little steps to get to the big picture, and people don't talk about that as much anymore. And sometimes that actually causes people to have fears and anxieties and frustrations. Like, sometimes for me, I think like, oh yeah, that'll be an easy task, no problem. And then it'll take me an extra hour than I had given myself, and I get all flustered and worked up and frustrated. So, but I'm just learning to also forgive myself a little bit with that too. Like, understand the fact that I'm not perfect. I'm not trying to be perfect. And I have to just let myself be a little bit more instead of like even picking on myself. So.
Yeah, that's important. And when you gain this strength, you're able to take on those fears more head on, and you won't even feel the need to drink. Like, oh, I need to do this. Like, for example, when I would go out with my friends, I felt like I literally needed to drink, or I just wouldn't, like, why would I even be there?
Yeah.
Like, I'm just such a loser, kind of mentality. But I'm like, well, if I drink, at least maybe I'll be like funny or do something tough or cool.
Yeah.
So yeah, it just totally eliminates that need for that.
Like, in a social situation, for me, like, when I get nervous, sometimes I get like a little too hyper. So the alcohol would calm that down, so I'd feel, like normal. Yeah, but then I'd keep calming it down, and then I'd get way past not normal.
So you're like up here, and then you get down to normal, but
Oh, and then it just kept going. And then it just kept crashing. Yeah.
But here's the thing, though, like, with a lot of people listening, there is some truth to that. So it's not a total lie. No. Like, some people might just be a little up there or down there. Like, I feel like I was maybe more in the down part, like too little.
Yeah.
And that would hype me up enough to be cool.
Yeah.
So yeah, it just depends on the person, but you got to think about that in regards to your own mind, that you're not 100% lying to yourself. It's like a 50% truth. So that can actually make it way more complicated.
Which is, that is where so many people fall into the trap of lying to themselves when they're drinking. I know I did that all the time. Like, with that example, like, I would tell myself that I would need the alcohol to go to the social situation, so I would show up normal, quote unquote normal. But the truth of the matter is, like, okay, I might have, like, seemed somewhat normal for a few minutes, but I was already, like, causing myself more anxiety because I was afraid of when the alcohol would wear off, then I'd get weird again or something. So, like, I would then put more alcohol in my system. So, like it would literally, I would be up here, you know, for that 5 seconds, but then I'd keep like adding a drink in, thinking that I wouldn't stay here. Well, guess what?
You're already there.
I was already like going down. Ship was going down.
Well, that's interesting that you actually thought about it that much. Guys and girls are different. I thought once I started drinking, I was like, I'm not thinking anymore. But that's really interesting. You never told me that.
Yeah.
How you thought of it, like you didn't even think you were drunk enough when you were way too drunk already. That's an interesting thing.
Well, it wasn't that like once I realized I was drunk, like then like I just didn't care. But like the leading up to the drunk, like I would make myself drunk faster, thinking that I was covering my own butt so I wouldn't get weird. But then I'd make myself weird. So why I thought that was the right thing to do, I don't understand.
I have to say now, actually thinking about it, I did the same thing.
Yeah.
But I never thought about that.
Well, it's funny, like when you listen to this kind of stuff, like you really start to like, did I do that? Did I pull that off? Like it makes you more self-aware.
Yeah.
So, and that's something that's so important, like understanding your self-awareness and getting comfortable with it. Because, I mean, you know, we're on this podcast. We might seem like, you know, we're totally fine right now, but both of us have anxiety doing this.
Oh yeah.
So.
No, it's definitely new for us, and over time it will be easier. But yeah, we're just trying to do it, and that's what this whole episode's about, is facing your fear.
Exactly.
And if you do it long enough, maybe it will become a strength.
That's what the hope is, for sure. So like, you know, it's public speaking for us right now, like doing this is a fear, but maybe one day, especially, you'll get good at it.
Yeah. Or both. It's okay.
Probably more you. So the truth is, no matter what though, like the want for the alcohol has not gone away for us. You know, I'm 2 years sober now, and it has gotten easier, but it is still there, you know, so you still have to be self-aware of it. Because for Josh and I, like, we know that we cannot drink anymore. We know that that is just not an option for us. But that is part of our self-awareness. Because for me, like, I always joke that alcohol for me is like Pringles. Once I have one, I can't stop. So once I pop, I can't stop. So, you know, but there were so many things that we were masking with the alcohol. You know, that we want to like explain a little bit more, like how we had these anxieties and then how we've been able to break them down for you. So, Josh, you want to go first?
Yeah. So with school, we mentioned before, with schooling for me in the past, the first time I tried it out, you know, I was always a smart kid, but I never really taught myself how to schedule stuff. So when I started doing the schooling again, it was hard for me to schedule it. Like, I just didn't, it took me way longer than it should have. Even when I wasn't really trying to get distracted with things, I just didn't put timelines on what I was doing.
Yeah.
And it just made something that should have took like 4 hours, take a whole day. You know? So Monique introduced me to the great idea of scheduling, because I've always been more of a
fly by the seat of your pants.
Yeah. Which works sometimes, but
and I mean, truthfully though, like him being more fly by the seat of your pants has helped me unschedule a little bit, because sometimes I way over schedule. Yeah. Too. So both are important.
Yeah, they are. And like with the scheduling though, it definitely helped me focus and be less stressed about the work.
Because you knew you had the time set up ready for it. So it made it easier to even jump in at that time.
Yeah, exactly. And also it helped with the podcast as well. Scheduling the podcast, like our goal for today is to do the podcast, which might sound extreme, but you know, we're trying to put something quality out there, and So yeah, that's what we're doing. We're scheduling whole days just to focus on this for you guys,
Yeah.
and hopefully we can
Because it
get
is
some good info
also,
out there.
yeah, because it is one of our anxieties. So, like, we know we have to give ourselves a quality amount of time that, like, nothing else is happening for us to be able to comfortably do it.
Well, it's funny because about this, talking about the facing your fears, and that's what we're doing today.
Yep.
But but yeah, so
Yeah. And, like, for me, it's been like I have anxieties for, hopefully having kids one day, future job opportunities, and really just like in our future home. Josh and I are working on plans right now. So all of those like do cause anxieties, like, and think about that, like a future home, there's a lot of details that go into it,
plus with the pricing and
pricing and everything. So, we're trying to tackle that, but we are tackling that by doing it one piece at a time. So, like every day, I'm just like, okay, I will respond to emails if they come. I'm just, that's it. Like, that's what I'm doing right now. And like, sometimes I'm playing around on Pinterest a little bit to try to get some ideas too, but like, I'm not doing a ton every day. I'm not making, everything about that, because then I would start getting anxiety about the whole project. Like,
you just wouldn't want to do it at all.
no, I'd get frustrated and give up, because there's a lot of steps to like a house, and just like there's a lot of steps to a podcast, there's a lot of steps to having kids and providing for kids. There's a lot of steps to whatever your various job is. But if you can break it down to simple tasks like I will answer an email, I will respond to somebody, I will take these vitamins, like breaking it down into one task makes it seem possible instead of
Because
like,
it is possible.
because it is absolutely possible. But when you have the big picture hanging over your head, it doesn't feel like that. Like if the entire house weight was on our shoulders right now, we wouldn't be able to move. But knowing that there's like an email to respond to, okay, that's something we know how to do. No problem. We can answer a question.
Yeah.
So, but
Yeah, very true.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, beyond true. So discovering these things about yourself really helps you in the long term.
It really does. It makes it easier when things like that come up in the future too. It gives you the tools to manage it, because you learned possibly on a smaller task. You've learned how to manage small little things, and then if you just keep doing it in small doses, it makes the big things happen. It'll make your dreams actually come true, which is an amazing thing.
All right, we're going to end off with the Jordan Peterson quote. And the quote goes, "To be fully self-conscious means that you are perfectly aware of your limitations and how you might be hurt. And then to make the decision to move forward in the unknown and land of the stranger anyway. That's one of the secrets to a good life."
And we really do hope that you're all making decisions to help yourself get to a better life, like Josh and I are trying to do. And we hope that you continue to join us and watch us. And if you ever have any questions, please let us know, because we'd be happy to discuss them with you at a later time. And we just hope that we'll see you next time too.
Yeah, see ya.
Bye.
Bye.